Thank you. Now, I believe the EU is facing substantial investment challenges in terms of meeting the climate targets that we have to achieve by 2030. We need additional annual investment of euro 180 billion in the energy and climate sectors alone. But this cannot be achieved just by the public sector. We also need a massive effort by the private sector too. So therefore, I welcome the Commission's proposal on low-carbon benchmarks as a step towards more sustainable financial system. I also note the efforts undertaken by the index providers in developing a wide range of indices aimed at capturing sustainability and climate considerations. The benchmark sector has an important role to fulfill, and I agree with the Commission's assertion that the financial benchmarks are a cornerstone of global capital markets, and many investors rely on financial benchmarks to measure the performance of financial products and for portfolio allocation. Nonetheless, the financial sector is lagging behind compared to the rest of our economy, given that only 0.3% of financial benchmarks are ESG indexes today. So, therefore, I also share the concerns expressed by the high-level expert group about financial benchmarks as a key driver of short-termism and not really reflecting long-term sustainability. And this sustainability risk, but rather tending towards the status quo and allocating capital to assets which are not necessarily aligned with long-term sustainable development objectives. So this is one of the problems we face, and we try and address this in this report. So I think it is important that the legislator steps in and shows a high level of ambition in line with European Parliament's own initiative report on sustainable finance. And the ambition should be realistic and flexible and open to advances in technological innovation. And at the same time, I think it's important that it gives the financial industry clarity and legal certainty around the direction we are heading. For me, the policy destination is clear. We need to achieve the climate goals that have been agreed by us, and they need to encompass the ambition outlined in other EU legislation, the parts that could be applicable to the real economy. So I'm thinking about the ETS system, rules on car emissions, and regulations on buildings. The important part I want to ensure is that investors are not misled by products labelled as green, but which are not in reality, commonly referred to as greenwashing. So what I propose additionally to the Commission proposal is the idea that we have to mainstream sustainability elements in the whole benchmarking exercise. That is why I added the date of 2022, so that the benchmark providers will publish the benchmarks aligned with the Paris Agreement commitments and also issues already implemented in other EU legislation. I also believe we need to standardise the methodology, and I believe this should be developed by the Commission in a delegated act and published not later than 2 years after the entry into force of this regulations. For investors, it is critical that they get clear and comparable information. That is why I want benchmark providers to describe precisely and in a standardised way the benchmarks in their statements and what the climate impact is of those benchmarks used and how they align with Paris agreements.